So let's cast our minds back to the moment the 2008 election results were finalized. A literal, monumental shift occurred in American history. For the very first time, an African American was elected to hold the highest office in the land. The sheer historical gravity of that moment, it absolutely cannot be overstated. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how that happened, the massive hurdles he faced right out of the gate, and the lasting legacy of his two terms. Just to put the sheer scale of this moment into perspective, 1.8 million. That is the estimated number of people who actually crowded into Washington, D.C. just to witness Obama's inauguration. I mean, it perfectly captures the incredible, almost palpable excitement and the enormous weight of expectations surrounding the swearing in of the first African American president. People travel from all corners of the country and, frankly, the world, just to be a part of a day that basically rewrote the American history books. Okay, let's dive into this. Following what was a notoriously hard-fought Democratic primary race against Hillary Clinton, Obama faced off against Arizona Senator John McCain, and the result was a highly decisive general election victory. The electoral map ended up heavily favoring Obama, securing his presidency with 365 electoral votes to McCain's 173. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is that while the victory was, of course, historic, the reality awaiting him in the Oval Office was, well, it was daunting, to say the least. As an incoming president, Obama inherited immense domestic and global challenges. We're talking about the devastating 2008 financial crisis, ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the continuing global war on terrorism. So to combat that severe economic downturn, Obama immediately proposed unprecedented federal spending just to revive the economy, right? Alongside a promise to renew America's stature in the world. Section 1, Roots, Education, and Identity. Before we get too deep into his policies, we really need to understand the fascinating origin story of how he even reached that historic 2008 moment. Because Barack Obama's early life was uniquely global. Born in Hawaii in 1961, his parents were Barack Sr., a Kenyan economist, and Stanley Ann Dunham, an American student. After they divorced, his mother married an Indonesian man, so Obama actually spent his early childhood in Indonesia. Then, right before the fifth grade, he moves back to Honolulu to live with his maternal grandparents and attend a private prep school on a scholarship. As he later detailed in his 1995 memoir, Dreams from My Father, this incredibly diverse upbringing led to a deep, really complex search for his own identity during his adolescence. And, this search for identity totally continued into adulthood and really propelled his progression into public service. He started out with 2 years at Occidental College in LA before transferring over to Columbia University to study political science and international relations. After graduating in 1983 and doing a bit of corporate work in New York City, he makes a highly pivotal career choice. He actually moved to the south side of Chicago to become a community organizer. There, he coordinated with local churches to try and improve housing conditions and create job training programs in a community that had been hit incredibly hard by steel mill closures. Section 2. Rise to National Prominence. So, his grassroots work in Chicago laid a really powerful foundation, but his trajectory was about to accelerate rapidly. In 1988, Obama enters Harvard Law School, where he achieved a massive milestone that definitely attracted some national attention. He became the first African-American president of the Harvard Law Review. After excelling there, he heads back to Chicago to join a small law firm specializing in civil rights. Oh, and it's definitely worth noting that in 1992, he married Michelle Robinson, a fellow lawyer who had similarly excelled at Harvard Law. They would go on to have 2 daughters, Malaya and Sasha, born in 1998 and 2001. Now, his national political ascent happened at a remarkable, honestly fast-tracked speed. Think about this. In just 12 years, he went from being elected to the Illinois Senate in 1996 to the U.S. Senate in 2004. That exact same summer, in 2004, he delivered a highly acclaimed keynote address at the Democratic National Convention, which really introduced him to the entire country. And, of course, just 4 short years later, in 2008, he's elected president. Section 3. First-term crises and reforms. Let's break down the chronological flow of his initial years in the Oval Office. Because early on, Obama pushed through 3 major signature bills to address those massive crises we mentioned earlier. First up, the economic stimulus to combat the financial crash. Second, his massive healthcare reform initiative. And third, sweeping legislation aimed at reforming the nation's financial institutions. Basically, these 3 pillars formed the bulk of his early domestic policy achievements. But beyond those 3 big bills, his first term saw a bunch of other significant actions. He pressed for a Fair Pay Act for women and instituted new consumer protection safeguards. He also successfully championed the repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, which finally allowed lesbian and gay Americans to serve openly in the military. Also, a really notable moment early in his first term, in 2009, he became the fourth U.S. president to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. But as we know, politics is all about momentum and majorities, right? So while 2009 was defined by sweeping legislative momentum, the 2010 midterm elections brought a massive power shift. The Democrats ended up losing control of the House of Representatives, and this newly divided government severely affected Obama's ability to push forward his future domestic policy agenda for the rest of his presidency. Section 4, Second Term and Global Policy. Navigating this new divided government, the administration increasingly focused their attention on complex foreign arenas. But despite those midterm legislative losses, Obama successfully secured a second term in the 2012 election. He defeated the Republican challenger, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney, by securing 332 electoral votes to Romney's 206. In his second term, the Middle East remained a persistent and, thankfully, incredibly complex foreign policy challenge. His administration undertook some major military and intelligence maneuvers. Most notably, Obama directed the operation that led to the killing of Osama bin Laden, the head of al-Qaeda and the mastermind behind the September 11 attacks. However, new threats were emerging. A self-proclaimed Islamic State arose during the Syrian civil war, inciting global terrorist attacks. On top of that, his administration sought to manage relations with a hostile Iran by pursuing a treaty designed specifically to hinder their development of nuclear weapons. And then there was another massive global initiative in 2015. 174 states plus the European Union. That is how many entities signed the Paris Climate Agreement. The Obama administration adopted the sweeping international accord with the goal of significantly reducing global greenhouse gas emissions and slowing down global warming. Section 5. Reflections on a Changing Union. As his second term began to draw to a close, the president spent time reflecting on the broader trajectory of the country. In his last year in office, Obama spoke at two events that clearly moved him deeply. The first was the 50th anniversary of the historic Civil Rights March from Selma to Montgomery. He connected his own history-making presidency right back to the blood, sweat, and tears of the broader civil rights movement, telling the crowd, "Our union is not yet perfect, but we are getting closer." The second event was the dedication of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. There, he reminded everyone in attendance of the ongoing, ever-evolving nature of the American project. He stated, "And that's why we celebrate, mindful that our work is not yet done." It was a sobering yet highly hopeful reflection on the progress made and the long road still ahead. Which really leaves us with this final provocative thought. How does Obama's rapid journey from a young man traversing Hawaii and Indonesia, searching for his own identity, to becoming a two-term president leading through massive economic crises and complex global conflicts reshape our understanding of America's ongoing historical narrative? It is such a complex, fascinating arc that proves without a doubt that history is always being written. Thank you so much for joining me.